Mom said Dad died in a car crash when I was 3. But 25 years later, my boss's DNA test exposed the truth. Stay with me through this story, and if it moves you, remember to show some love by liking, subscribing, and sharing with those who matter to you. My name is Ayanna Price, and I'm 28 years old. For as long as I can remember, I believed my father, Caleb Price, died in a tragic car accident when I was just a toddler. My mother, Lorraine, never talked much about him. Anytime I asked questions, she'd change the subject or tell me it was too painful to revisit. So I grew up with this empty space in my life, wondering what kind of man my father had been. All I had were little fragments of stories that slipped out from relatives at family gatherings. How he was charming, ambitious, but sometimes reckless. None of it gave me a real picture, and Mom always pulled me away before I could ask more. I told myself that maybe it was better not knowing, that maybe some stories were meant to stay buried. Still, that silence shaped me. I grew up always feeling like something was missing, a shadow that followed me through childhood and into adulthood. Life pushed me forward. I graduated college, worked hard, and recently landed a job at a rising tech consulting firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to finally build something for myself without looking back. My new boss, Omari Livingston, was sharp, magnetic, and carried himself with authority. Everyone respected him, but there was something about him that made me nervous. Not because he was cruel, but because of how easily he seemed to read people. He had this way of looking straight through you, like he could tell when you were holding something back. From the first week, Omari challenged me. He pushed me to think bigger, to be bolder in my work. I wanted to impress him, not just because he was my boss, but because something about him felt strangely familiar. His mannerisms, the way he raised his eyebrow when he was skeptical, even his deep voice, it stirred something in me I couldn't quite explain. Still, I buried those feelings and focused on my work. After all, I had grown up with enough secrets in my life. The last thing I needed was to start imagining connections where none existed. But even then, deep down, I couldn't shake the sense that my life was about to change. I didn't know it yet, but the story I'd been told my entire life, the story of my father's death, wasn't just a lie. It was the first thread in a web of betrayal that would soon unravel everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, and even the man who now stood at the head of my career. And it all began with a simple test meant for fun, a test that would rip open 25 years of silence and force me to face a truth I never imagined. It started as nothing more than a team bonding activity. At the company retreat, someone suggested we all take a fun ancestry DNA test. People laughed, joked about finding long-lost royalty or some distant cousin across the country. I went along with it, not thinking twice. For me, it was just another silly group exercise, another way to fit in at my new job. Weeks later, the results came in. My email notification blinked during lunch, and with casual curiosity, I opened it. At first, the little pie chart of percentages didn't surprise me. Mostly African American heritage with traces of other roots I already expected. But then I scrolled down and my heart stopped. There it was, a direct match. 50% shared DNA with Omari Livingston, my boss. I blinked, convinced it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was a glitch, maybe the system got confused. But no, the number stared back at me, undeniable, impossible to ignore. I tried to act normal that afternoon, but every time I saw Omari walk past, my stomach twisted. He looked calm, composed, completely unaware. Or so I thought. Near the end of the day, his assistant told me Omari wanted to see me in his office. My chest tightened as I walked down the hall, each step heavy. Inside, Omari sat behind his desk, not his usual confident self, but unsettled, almost nervous. He gestured for me to close the door. "Ayanna," he began slowly, "I need to ask you something about this DNA test." I froze. My mouth went dry. He turned his laptop toward me, and I saw the same notification, the same shocking 50% DNA match. "According to this," he said carefully, "you and I were family. Half-siblings." The room felt like it tilted. My ears rang as his words sank in. Half-siblings? That couldn't be possible. I'd grown up believing my father had died when I was 3 years old. My entire life, my mother told me the same story. How could I share DNA with the man who signed my paychecks? "I don't understand," I whispered. "My father is dead. He died in a car accident. My mom told me." Omari leaned back, shaking his head. "That's not what this says. Either the test is wrong, or one of us hasn't been told the truth." The air between us thickened with confusion and suspicion. Omari's eyes searched mine, not with anger, but with the same desperate need to make sense of it all. He rubbed his forehead and muttered, "I don't know what this means yet. But if it's true, it changes everything." My heart ached, torn between disbelief and fear. Was this really happening? The father I had mourned my whole life. Had he been alive all along? And if so, why would my mother lie? I left his office shaken, clutching the secret like a live wire. Everything I thought I knew about my childhood was cracking apart, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth hiding underneath. I couldn't wait another day. The shock from the DNA results burned inside me like fire. I drove straight to my mother's house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached. The whole way there, memories replayed in my head. Bedtime stories where Mom said Dad was watching me from heaven, birthdays when she whispered how proud he would have been. All of it felt like glass shattering now. When I pulled into the driveway, Mom was on the porch watering her flowers, as if the world hadn't just collapsed around me. I slammed the car door and marched up to her. "We need to talk," I snapped, my voice shaking. She looked startled. "Ayana, what's wrong?" I didn't waste a second. "Why did you lie to me about Dad?" Her face drained of color. The watering can slipped from her hand, spilling across the concrete. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. I pulled out my phone, shoved the DNA results in her face. This says Omari Livingston is my half-brother. Which means Dad isn't dead. He's alive. You've been lying to me my whole life." For a long moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, her eyes glistening. Then, finally, she sank into the porch chair like her legs couldn't hold her. "I never wanted you to find out this way," she murmured. "That's not an answer," I fired back. "Where is he? Why did you tell me he was gone?" Mom pressed her hands together, trembling. "Because the truth was worse than death. Caleb is alive, yes. But he abandoned us, Ayana. When you were 3, he left me for another woman. Selena Livingston. Omari's mother. The name hit me like a slap. My boss's mother. His perfect, well-dressed, untouchable mother. Tears welled in Mom's eyes. He chose her. He built a life with her, while I worked double shifts to raise you. He never came back. He never asked about you. I told you he died because I wanted to protect you. I didn't want you growing up feeling unwanted." I staggered back, my stomach twisting. Protect me? By erasing half my life? By making me grieve a man who wasn't even gone? The betrayal doubled. First my father's rejection, then my mother's lie to cover it up. "You let me believe I was fatherless," I choked out. "You made me mourn someone who was still alive. Do you know how cruel that is?" She reached for me, desperate. "Ayana, please, everything I did out of love. I couldn't bear to see you crushed by the truth." But I pulled away. Love wasn't supposed to feel like chains. Love wasn't supposed to smother you with lies. Without another word, I stormed off the porch, ignoring her calls behind me. I drove away with tears blurring my vision, my chest aching with rage. My father had abandoned me. My mother had lied to me. And in that moment, I didn't know who I hated more. Omari was the one who set it up. He said if we wanted answers, we needed to hear them straight from Caleb Price himself. My stomach twisted at the thought. For 25 years, I believed this man was gone from the world, a ghost who never got the chance to know me. Now I was preparing to meet him face to face, not as a grieving daughter, but as a stranger demanding the truth. We pulled up to a sprawling estate on the edge of town. The mansion rose behind iron gates, polished and intimidating, the kind of place that screamed power and money. Omari parked, glanced at me, and said softly, "Ready?" I nodded, though my heart hammered so loud it felt like it echoed in the car. Inside, the house was all marble floors and grand staircases. A maid led us into a sitting room where Caleb Price stood waiting. He looked older, of course, graying at the temples, lines around his mouth, but his posture was proud, his tailored suit perfect. He smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. "Ayana," he said, extending his hand as if we were business associates. "I've heard so much about you." I didn't take his hand. "You've heard about me? From who?" His smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. "Well, I always knew you were out there. But your mother, Lorraine, made things impossible." There it was. The excuse. He sank into his chair, gesturing for us to sit, and launched into his story. According to him, he had tried to be there for me, but Lorraine pushed him away, filled with bitterness and anger. He said she never gave him a chance, that she poisoned any hope of a relationship. He spoke smoothly, confidently, the way a man does when he's used to being believed. I sat there listening, rage boiling beneath my skin. I remembered my mother working double shifts, dragging herself home exhausted, barely keeping the lights on. She never had time for bitterness. She was too busy surviving. Omari leaned forward, his tone sharp. So why did you tell me your first child didn't survive? Why lie to me? Caleb chuckled nervously, waving his hand. You must have misunderstood. I never said that. But I could see it in Omari's face. He knew that wasn't true. He'd heard those words, probably more than once. Caleb dodged again, changing the subject, complimenting Omari's leadership at the company, pretending the past was nothing but a blur of miscommunications. As I watched him, I felt a chill. On the surface, Caleb was polished and charming, the kind of man who could win a room in minutes. But underneath, there was something slippery, something calculating. His eyes never fully softened, even when he smiled. It was like he was performing a role, hiding the rot beneath his polished skin. And in that moment, I realized, my mother may have lied to me, but Caleb had built his entire life on lies. And I had just stepped into the heart of them. I couldn't shake the unease after meeting Caleb. His smile was too polished, his answers too slippery. Something inside me screamed that he wasn't telling the whole truth. So, when Omari invited me back to the estate under the excuse of reviewing some company files, I agreed. Deep down, I wanted to see what Caleb and his perfect wife, Selena, were really like behind closed doors. While Omari kept Caleb occupied in the study, I wandered further into the house. The voices carried before I even realized where I was going, sharp, angry tones coming from a room down the hall. I froze outside the half-open door. Selena's voice cut through first, low but furious. You should have left well enough alone, Caleb. If she keeps digging, everything we built will collapse. Caleb snapped back, his tone colder than I had ever heard. You think I wanted her? I never wanted that child. It was your idea to fake my death, to wipe her and Lorraine from my life. Don't you dare pin this on me. My breath caught. Fake his death? My knees almost buckled. Selena hissed. Yes, it was my idea. Because you were weak. You couldn't even look that girl in the eye without feeling guilty. I made you cut them off so we could live free of their baggage. And it worked. Look at us now. Power. Wealth. Respect. Caleb's reply was bitter. Respect built on lies. And now those lies are coming back. I pressed a hand over my mouth, tears burning my eyes. All these years, I thought my father had been stolen from me by fate. But the truth was uglier. He had been alive. He had chosen to erase me. Worse, he had agreed to let Selena dictate my non-existence. I slipped away before they could notice me, my heart pounding so loud it felt like an alarm. By the time I found Omari outside on the terrace, my hands were trembling. He looked at me, concerned, and I blurted it out, the entire argument I had just overheard. For a moment, he said nothing. His jaw tightened, and he turned his face toward the sky like he needed air. Finally, he muttered, I knew he lied. He told me once, when I was a kid, that his first child hadn't survived. He said she died at birth. I believed him. The pain in his eyes mirrored my own. We had both been shaped by different versions of the same deception. Me mourning a dead father who lived, him mourning a dead sister who never died. Caleb had stolen the truth from both of us, shaping our lives with his lies. In that moment, standing side by side in the fading light, Omari and I realized something heavy. Neither of us had grown up with a father. We had grown up with a ghost, one carefully crafted by Caleb and Selena's betrayal. And now, the truth demanded to be faced. After that night, Omari and I sat together for the first time not as boss and employee, not even as strangers, but as siblings bound by a wound we hadn't chosen. The air was heavy between us, but there was also a strange kind of relief. Finally, someone who understood what it felt like to grow up in the shadow of Caleb Price's choices. We met at a quiet cafe away from the city. No assistants, no boardroom pressure, just two people piecing together broken histories. Omari stirred his coffee for a long time before speaking. You know, he said slowly, people think I had it easy. Fancy schools, the big house, every opportunity handed to me. But what they don't see is what it cost. Dad was never really there. He'd walk into a room and already be thinking about his next deal. To him, I wasn't a son. I was a project, an heir to mold. His voice cracked slightly, and it startled me. This man who always seemed so controlled, now stripped bare. I nodded, swallowing hard. Mom carried the weight alone. She worked double shifts at the hospital, Sometimes came home so tired she fell asleep at the kitchen table. And she never complained. She never let me see how hard it was. But even as a kid, I could feel it. I knew she was breaking her back just so I wouldn't go without. Omari looked at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't expected. Respect. She sounds strong. Stronger than he ever gave her credit for. That word, he, hung between us like poison. Caleb Price. The man who had abandoned us both in different ways. To the world, he was a respected businessman, a pillar of success in the community. But to us, he was a liar, a manipulator, and a father in name only. We can't let him keep his perfect reputation, I whispered, more to myself than to Omari. People look up to him. They praise him. But they don't know who he really is, what he's done. Omari leaned back, a sharp glint in his eyes. Then maybe it's time they did. I've always suspected he built his empire on more than hard work. Deals that didn't add up. Families who lost their homes after he swooped in with contracts. But I never had proof. Something in me sparked. A quiet fire that had been waiting to burn. Then let's find proof. If he wants to live by lies, we'll uncover the truth. For the first time, Omari smiled. Not cold or calculating, but almost proud. You and me, then. Together. It was a fragile alliance, stitched together by pain and betrayal. But as we sat there, plotting in hushed voices, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about making sure Caleb Price's spotless mask finally cracked for the world to see. And we were ready to be the ones to tear it off. I threw myself into the search like a woman possessed. Nights after work, I sat at my kitchen table with files spread out, digging into every deal, every contract Caleb Price had ever touched. The deeper I went, the uglier it became. His empire wasn't built on brilliance. It was built on the backs of people who looked like me. Families who never stood a chance once his lawyers showed up at their doors. The records told the story plain as day. Entire neighborhoods swept away by his so-called developments. Black families forced out of homes their grandparents had worked decades to hold on to. Promises of fair compensation that turned into pennies compared to the true value of their land. And all of it neatly wrapped in polished press releases about revitalizing communities. One night, I sat across from Omari in his office, sliding a folder across the desk. Look at this, I said. Contracts, deeds, signatures. He didn't just buy property. He tricked people out of it. Whole blocks gone. Omari's jaw clenched as he flipped through the papers. I knew it, he muttered. I always felt something was off. He never talked about the beginning, about how he got his first real money. Just told me to be proud of what he'd built. His voice darkened. But I never had evidence. Hearing him say that sent a strange shiver through me. Omari had grown up in Caleb's house, under his roof, yet even he had been shut out from the truth. That meant Caleb never wanted anyone too close to the foundation, because the foundation was rotten. It was my mother who finally handed me the missing piece. She called me one Sunday evening, her voice soft but heavy. Ayana, she said, there's something I should have given you a long time ago. When I arrived, she pulled a worn shoebox from the back of her closet. Inside were stacks of yellowing envelopes. Letters Caleb had sent her in the early years, back when he still pretended to care. My hands shook as I unfolded them. The letters weren't love notes. They were records, half confessions scribbled in anger. Mentions of shortcuts he had to take, deals that would shut down anyone who stood in the way. One letter even named families he'd strong-armed out of their homes, mocking them for being too naive to fight back. I read them out loud, my throat tight. Mom sat across from me, eyes lowered, ashamed. I kept them because I thought one day you might need to know who he really was, she whispered. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange kind of power surge through me. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. These letters, combined with the files I'd dug up, were proof. Proof that Caleb Price wasn't a self-made man. He was a predator who had carved out his success by bleeding others dry. And now, finally, I had the weapons to strike back. The night we chose to confront them, the sky was heavy with thunder, as if the world itself knew what was coming. Omari and I drove in silence to the mansion, both of us rehearsing the words we needed to say. By the time we stepped through the front doors, I was done feeling like a forgotten child. I was ready to face Caleb Price as the man who had stolen pieces of my life. He and Selena were waiting in the grand living room. Caleb rose from his leather chair, wearing the same polished smile he always wore, while Selena leaned against the fireplace, eyes sharp and unwelcoming. Ayana, Caleb said smoothly, I wish you'd come under better circumstances. Still, I'm glad you're here. We can finally make things right. I didn't sit. I didn't even blink. You mean buy me off? I asked coldly. His smile widened, like he was trying to charm me. You've been through a lot, I understand. But there's a place for you. I can offer you a role in the company, a generous salary, security. You don't need to fight me. You could have everything you've ever wanted. The anger in me rose hot. I stepped closer, my voice firm. The only thing I ever wanted was a father who didn't lie. And you can't give me that. For a split second, the mask on his face slipped. His jaw tightened before he leaned back, pretending not to care. Selena pushed off the fireplace, her voice dripping with venom. You think you deserve anything from him? You were the mistake he should have erased sooner. Do you know why I told him to cut you out? Because I knew you'd grow up to be trouble. I wasn't going to let some woman from his past threaten my place in his life. Her words were like claws, each one digging deeper. My chest burned, but I refused to look away. Omari stood, fists clenched. So that's it? You erased her because you were afraid of losing your grip on him. Selena's eyes flashed. I protected what was mine. And it worked. Until now. Caleb finally dropped the act of calm. His voice was low and hard. You don't understand the game you're playing. Cross me and you'll regret it. I built everything you see around you with power and influence. People respect me, Ayana. People fear me. If you think you can destroy me, you'll end up crushed. I met his glare, my pulse steady. For the first time, I wasn't the child who believed in bedtime lies or mourned a ghost. I was the woman who had uncovered the truth. You already crushed me once, I said softly. But not this time. Omari stepped beside me, and together, we turned our backs on him. The storm outside cracked open, and I knew this battle was only just beginning. We didn't wait long after that confrontation. Omari and I gathered every file, every letter, every piece of evidence that painted the real picture of Caleb Price. The shoebox of letters from my mother, the contracts I uncovered, the deeds that proved he had stolen from families. Together, it was more than enough to tear apart the image he had polished for decades. Omari made the call to the authorities. His voice was calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders as he laid out the crimes of the man who had raised him. I handled the press. It only took one envelope slid across a journalist's desk before the machine began to turn. Within days, headlines screamed with Caleb's name. Local business giant under fire for corruption. Community leaders demand justice. The fall was quick and merciless. Business partners who once bragged about knowing Caleb stopped answering his calls. Investors pulled out. Clients severed ties. The empire he had built over decades began to crumble, brick by brick, exposed for the hollow structure it was. Selena, who had always been glued to his side like armor, didn't even last through the first week of scandal. I saw it in the papers. Her photographed stepping into a sleek black car with luggage piled behind her. No statement, no goodbye. She left him the moment the fortune cracked, abandoning the man she once swore she had protected. Watching from the outside, I expected to feel nothing but triumph. But when the news replayed footage of Caleb being shouted down by protesters, his face pale and desperate, I felt something heavier. Justice, yes, but also a strange grief for the father he never became. Through it all, Mom stayed quiet, letting me decide how far I wanted to go. One night, I sat at her kitchen table again, the same place where so many of our hardest talks had happened. She poured tea, her hands trembling slightly. Ayana, she said softly, I know I failed you by lying. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I only hurt you more. I looked at her, really looked at her. The lines of exhaustion on her face, the scars of years spent carrying everything alone. She had made mistakes, yes, but they were born from love, even if twisted by fear. You carried this by yourself for so long, I told her. You worked yourself half to death just so I'd have a chance. I was angry, but I see it now. You gave me everything you could. Tears filled her eyes, and when she reached for my hand, I didn't pull away this time. For the first time since the truth came out, I felt like a daughter again, not just a victim of Caleb's betrayal. Caleb's empire was gone. Selena had vanished, and the man himself was left facing lawsuits and disgrace. But sitting there with my mother's hand in mine, I knew the real victory wasn't in tearing him down. It was in reclaiming the family he had tried so hard to erase. The downfall of Caleb Price was swift and merciless. The lawsuits piled higher than his empire ever stood, and the media that once praised him now circled like vultures. Bankruptcy hearings stripped him of everything: cars, homes, and the gleaming reputation he had built on lies. By the time the dust settled, Only one estate remained, and even that echoed with emptiness. I drove there one gray afternoon, unsure if I wanted answers or simply an ending. The mansion that once hosted glittering parties stood hollow, its windows shuttered and its halls silent. Inside, I found him sitting alone in the grand living room, a man who once commanded rooms now slumped in a worn armchair. His eyes lit up when he saw me, desperate and weary all at once. "Ayana," he rasped, as though my name were the last thread tethering him to the world. "I was wrong. I know it now. I lost everything, and I lost you before I ever had the chance. Please forgive me." The words should have pierced me. Once maybe they would have. But standing in that cold, empty room, I felt no pull, no warmth, only the weight of years he had chosen to erase me. My voice came out steady, almost detached. "You already died for me once," I told him. "There's nothing left to forgive." His face crumpled, but I didn't stay to watch. I turned and walked out, the sound of my footsteps echoing down the marble hall like the closing of a chapter one had carried too long. Omari was waiting outside, leaning against his car. He didn't ask what was said. He only looked at me, and in that look I saw the same choice he had made. He wasn't going back inside, wasn't going to chase after a father who never truly wanted us. "He's not our story anymore," Omari said quietly. And he was right. We drove back into the city, not as boss and employee, not as estranged siblings clinging to fractured truths, but as something steadier. Family we chose, family forged out of survival. That evening, we gathered at Mom's small kitchen table. Lorraine had cooked too much, as always, trying to fill the room with comfort. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the shadow of Caleb hovering over us. There was laughter, real, unforced. Omari teased me about my cooking skills. Mom fussed over both of us, and I let myself lean into it. We weren't perfect. We carried scars that wouldn't disappear overnight. But as I looked across the table at my mother and my brother, I realized we had rebuilt something stronger than the lies Caleb left behind. The man who tried to erase us was gone, but we remained, choosing each other, choosing love, choosing to live beyond his betrayal. That was the closure I never knew I needed. Should Ayana have given her father one last chance? Or was she right to shut the door forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious what you think. And if stories like this keep you hooked, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.